Okay, so thank you everyone for your patience. Today I would like to introduce Dave Robinson. So Dave, if you could give us a short little introduction about yourself and your presentation here, and then we can get started.
Sure. I'm just curious, how many people do we have?
Let's see. Can someone let us know? I can't. Oh, I think we have 12 people in this. 12 people in the current session right now.
Okay. Hello, my name is Dave Robinson. I'm Algonquin Anishinaabe from the Timiskaming First Nation in northwestern Quebec. Very honored to be living here as a visitor on Coast Salish territory in the village of Musqueam. I'm here today to present on carving the benefits of carving and why this should be something that's offered in schools. The reason why I asked Sean how many people are in this session is because I'm speaking right now to a phone, so I don't have a screen and I can't see your faces. I wish I could, but I can't. And so I'd just like to say hello to everyone. Thank you for coming. And at any time, if you have any questions, even if you have questions right now about what I'm going to talk about, please unmic and ask your question, because that'll help. It's going to help me engage, because all I see is a phone and no faces. And so I hope everyone's doing good. Okay, so how I did this last year is what I did is I asked everyone if they would like to do this puzzle. You see, so there's a circle puzzle I have here, and it's out of old growth yellow cedar. It's a project that I did with a camp called Cedar Science Camp at UBC and Joel Lehman. First Nations youth from around BC came to Vancouver once a month. And so for once a month, I'd teach them about wood, the cellular structure of wood, some of the anatomical features, and then we'd work on this old growth piece of yellow cedar that was, when it came, it was a square. But then I drew a circle on it, cut it into a circle, brought some rasps, and we began rasping them. And as I was teaching the youth about wood and the structure of wood, we began, well, at home I cut the pieces, but I explained when I brought them why I cut the pieces. So I'll just get into it right now and start explaining, as I was explaining to a class of new students, of what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And kind of, it wouldn't go exactly like this, because there'd be some interaction. So I'm not sure your view of these pieces over here, but there's 14 pieces. Not, when you look at them, you're not going to think circle, but they are. And the reason why these pieces are the way they are is because of the structure of wood. So if you've been anywhere and you've looked at wood and you see the cracks in the wood, those cracks are actually called checks, and it's how wood is giving off moisture. It's also how it's taking on moisture. And so when we were looking at this piece of wood and it's drying out and those checks or cracks are happening, we looked at it and said, okay, we want to make this into a medicine wheel, or what appears to be a medicine wheel. And so there's going to be 4 parts: the north, the south, the east, and the west. And maybe we just put it in 4 quadrants. But so in the beginning, just cut a big X in the circle. And so it started off, this will help. This is from a different project. So the puzzle started off like this. It was a square, but we cut it into a circle. And then we had the four, what you'd say, quadrants, right? 4 directions. And as we're looking at the directions, and we could see this piece has almost no checks. But as we were looking at this piece of wood, we could see that there were certain checks that, as time went on, they would become problematic. And so there's 2 checks right here, but they're not problematic. This is a strong piece of wood. But you see, it used to be like that, okay? And there was just, as I was looking at it, I knew that if we cut here, it was going to add strength to this piece and to this piece, okay? And so that's how the circle ended up 14 pieces. I'll just ask right now, are there any questions to this point? Or would anyone like more clarity on any point? No, okay. So what I'm going to propose we do is, first I'm going to ask, is there anyone in that viewing audience that would like to help me put this puzzle together? If yes, just unmic and say yes. Okay, I'm gathering, no one's on mic, so no. So what's going to happen is I'm just going to put this together, okay? And as I'm putting it together, I'd like you to imagine that you're in a class, you know, you're First Nations, well, probably all are here, but you're back in your school experience. Some carver guys come in, showing you 14 pieces in, I carry it around. In my guitar case. So usually when I come in, there's always that interest in, you know, the guitar. Someone's come to play music, but of course there's no guitar in there, there's the pieces. Then they open them up and I put them out and we get into it. And so I'm gonna ask one more time. Would anyone like to be a participant with me as I put the pieces together? No, okay. So normally I'll tell the youth, I'll say, okay, because this was supposed to be based on the medicine wheel, which is the Indigenous teaching model that's used around the world. My adopted uncle Shane Point teaches me that the actual medicine wheels come from the prairies, and they're rocks of different shapes, colors, and sizes placed in circle. No one knows what they're used for, but we do know spirit. Okay, but we're talking about a puzzle here. Okay, so in that though, there's directions: north, south, east, west. And so I'll always tell the youth beforehand, I'll have found out what direction is north in the classroom or gymnasium or wherever we are. And so I asked Rosalind's husband today when I got here, where's north? And he said, north's there. So normally, depending on the group, sometimes I'll help and I'll say, you know, if you can make out the word north, south, east, or west, then put those pieces to where they go. And that's going to help you. Because although it looks simple, I've done this with engineers and architects that are very advanced, and they weren't able to do it. They needed some help. But I've also done it with, you know, kids, kindergartens, and the kindergartens did it, no problem. So we have the north and we have the south. Now the west, if you'll see, you actually can't see that it says west. Doesn't really look, it's not so clear. What happened there was, as I was carving it with the youth, we were sanding, and as we were sanding, the words would would sand away. And so on the north and the south, I was more not vigilant. I was better, I remember. But as we were sanding the west, I forgot. And so it kind of went away. But there's still some marks there that you can kind of sort of tell that something was written there. And a person could deduce that that may be a west or an east, not knowing which one it is. And so we have three pieces, north, west, and south. Now the east on this puzzle is a trick because it's made of three different pieces. So this is the part where engagement with others is very beneficial, because rather than me just say, well, these are the three pieces, we have to go through it. But one of the things that would be beneficial right now is, I don't know what your view or how much you can see of the pieces, whether you can see the cracks or the checks on them. If anyone in there could let me know, just on mic and say, yes, we can see cracks.
Yeah, Dave, we can sort of see the words, but it's not too clear.
Okay, beautiful. I'm going to hold up these pieces a little bit closer, okay? And then I'm going to put them back down. And I'm going to do that so that we're both going to understand each other a little bit better once I do that. So this is the north, okay? Now, this is a check. I hope you can see that. This is a check. Okay, so there's two main checks going down there. Now, I'm going to hold up the south next. The south, although there's four checks, there's actually only three main checks. There's a check here, there's a check here, and there's a check here. Those are key. Why they're key is because as we're going along, I'm going to show you the west. Almost no one has ever said that's west, you know, because it's so worn away that even though this almost kind of sort of looks like an S, it might be upside down like that, could be like this, could be like that, right? But what makes this an easy piece to know and see that many of the youth have picked up on is this check here. This check is what tells you where the piece goes. We'll show you. So on the north, as you'll remember, there's a check that runs here and it connects to this check here. So as I put this piece here, you'll see, if you were able to see, then you'd see that this check lines up all the way. Now, the next part that I'm going to show you is this piece. The reason why this piece is so beneficial to the Western education classroom for infusing Indigenous ways of knowing into math, science, could be an art class, could be a literature class, doesn't matter what the class is because, well, for math anyway, shape recognition, you know. So there's 14 pieces, they're all different types of triangles, okay? Very similar shapes. So as we're going along, the puzzle is all about recognizing triangle shapes that are developing and looking at the pieces that are available. And then the original beginning of it, where are the checks? So this piece here has 3 checks. This piece here has 2 checks. So if you'll remember, the north piece had 2 main checks. The south piece has 4 checks, but there's 3 main checks in this one. And so I learned this from one of the youth that helped out. They said, well, this triangle has 2 checks, that north has 2 checks. Let's try it there. They tried it there and it popped right in. And of course the checks lined up. And then they said, this one has 3. There's 4 here, but it'll line up with these 3. And when they did that, the interesting thing about this is, check it out. There's a small little check there. And when you go that, it connects the line all the way. So sometimes it takes longer than other times to get to this point where, and it doesn't always happen like this, you know. Sometimes the west is over here, it's up here, you know, and this puzzle has been almost completed, and then through, for whatever reason, it went further away from being finished than finished. But this is all about teamwork and working together. The most important part about this puzzle is doing something together. So I've done this with young people where, I mean, they saw it. It doesn't matter. They fired it together, you know, and, you know, feeling good about how fast and easy that was for them. And a lot of times, you know, people will think, well, that wasn't hard enough, right? Or there's been other groups where it's been a real struggle, you know, and wow, that was kind of too hard. And in both instances, that's not the case. What it is it's about doing something together, doing our best, and communicating. Okay, so I'm going to give this to you. The east, made of 3 pieces. There's this one, which again, there's kind of sort of some letters on there, right? Can't quite see. This one's very difficult. So when I was in Picogan last year, the kukum came up and she told me, tell your mom your kukum said you're doing good work. But then she also told me, sorry, I'm trying to find this. There we go. She said that this was I'm trying to line it up. There we go. She said that this was a bear and a beaver. How was it? Well, this piece here, she pointed it out, is a bear and a beaver. And it's the piece of the east that connects to the center. Okay, now this piece here, the final piece, is the piece that pretty much every time I have to give a little bit of help to the group. So where that goes is right here. Okay, you can kind of sort of see that. All right, now you can't really see, but I'm going to hold these triangles up for you. What we have left is all triangles. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 triangles left. Okay, I'm going to hold them up so you can see them before I put them in. Okay, so first triangle. I'm not going to put it in yet because it's too easy. Second triangle. Okay, this is the biggest one, and usually once the youth realize where to put this, it really goes fast. So I'm just going to put that in for you. It goes here. For some reason, no one can ever see this triangle. Normally because this triangle is not here, you know, so they'll put it here like that. But it goes like this. Once it goes there, a lot of times people will see that this triangle goes here. But not always. Sometimes, a lot of times, people will think that this triangle goes here. See? And so, as you can see, these triangles are very similar, you know, and the spaces that they want to go into are very similar. Okay? But this is the one that goes up. So, as you'll see, these 2 triangles, very similar. So what happens oftentimes is people will want to put this big one there because it's so big and that's so clearly a triangle, and this one won't be there yet, right? And so they won't actually see that this is going to be a triangle. Anyway, this goes here. This goes here. Oh, actually, I think I got that wrong. You see, these 2 triangles look very similar. So I almost put the wrong one here, right? which would make us try to put that there. And as you can see, it doesn't look right. But how it goes, like that, like that. Now we've come to one of the most interesting and fascinating parts of this, which is the last two pieces, okay? Now you see this piece here? This is the only piece that is soft on all sides, okay? All these other pieces, you can tell the bottom because it's kind of rough, right? This one here, soft on all sides, okay? So this is usually the one that will trick people because they're going to try to go like this, right? There's only two pieces left, but how do they fit, you know? Can't figure it out. And then sometimes they'll try it like that. There we go. And then they'll figure it out. Oh, it goes like this. You know? And as you can see, the puzzle becomes complete. So that's an exercise that can be done with preschool kids, can be done with high school kids. It can be done with engineers. It can be done with groups as big as 100. It can be done with groups. It can be done with one person. Doesn't matter, right? What this is important is that it's done. Well, if even if there's only one person there, I will be there. Meaning, there's more than one. We're working together to do something that is about having fun, and they're depending on who's present. There will be different teachings shared, right? And so I brought this to Picogan last year, which is where my grandmother, Maggie Polson, is from. I'm from Temiskaming and Picogan. My name that I was born with is Dave Robinson. My grandfather is Dave Mackenzie from Temiskaming. And my grandmother, Maggie Polson. Last year I went to Picogan. all 9 Algonquin First Nations gathered there for an art conference called Minwashin. It's called Minwashin. For some reason, there we go. You gotta move one way when it goes the other, right? Oh, there we go. Minwashin. There we go. So that's the conference that I went to last year. And I brought this. And there was an old man that come up. So grandfather came up and he said, "Your puzzle's in the wrong direction. It's all wrong." I said, "Oh, no. What did I do? How can I fix it?" And he goes, "Well, the east is that way." He goes, "You just got to fix it. So it's going in the right direction." So I said, "Okay, no problem." So I fix it. And then he says, "My grandfather told me that you always need to know where the east is because that's where the sun rises and you'll know where it sets. And if you know where the east is, then you'll never be lost." And he said, "Good job. You're doing good work with this puzzle and keep going." So I said, "Okay." And so that was a beautiful experience. And then Gloria Polson, my cousin, I call her Auntie. Auntie Gloria Polson brought her great-granddaughter. She had 3 or 4 great-grandchildren there, but I just one of them on the day when I had the puzzle. And so one of my her great-granddaughter put the puzzle together, and that was great honor to say that one of my youngest cousins did this puzzle. So this puzzle is about 6 years old now, maybe even 8. And so I've done this with a lot of people, you know. And at this point, I have more to share, but at this point, I'd like to just say, is there any questions or comments or, you know, first of all, do you like it?
Hey,
Who's
Dave.
not sure?
Thanks so much for sharing your presentation and teaching us about how to put the puzzle together. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Oh, okay, before I go on, I'll say one thing. When I started this, I called it the medicine wheel puzzle, but I stopped calling it that. Now I just call it a circle puzzle. Yeah, so it's just a circle puzzle, but you can use the teaching model that's used around the world of medicine wheel, right? No one actually owns that. So what I learned about the term pan, so Pan America, pan teaching. The medicine wheel is like a pan teaching. So teachings that span from across the board, or all across the pan, that are shared. Similar to, if you've ever heard of the First Nations mental health and wellness continuum framework that my sister, Dr. Jennifer Robinson, when she was working as a senior health policy analyst for the Assembly First Nations, she was a part of that. And what she told me about that is they visited First Nations across Canada, north, south, in the middle, east to west. And the First Nations mental health and wellness continuum, can I get some water? Thank you. Are elements of wellness that are shared and agreed upon by First Nations, Inuits, and Métis across Canada. And so what that continuum says is a whole bunch of things, you know, like I didn't understand it when I looked at it. When I looked at it, there has to be a different, it's kind of like when people first look at this puzzle before it's put together. All these pieces, how are they going to make a circle? When you look at that circle of the continuum, there has to be 1,000 things. Governance, school, policing, you name it, it's in there. And I said, Jen, what is this? You know, and she says, okay, look at it, and do you see the color of the background? I said, yeah. She said, what color? I said, red. She said, that red represents Mother Earth. And I said, okay, well, what of all this stuff, you know, on top of it? She says, well, what the red represents is Mother Earth, and what the continuum is saying, that if all these different parts of society, you know, whatever they may be, governance, education, school, food, if all the different parts of society don't begin with culture, culture comes from Mother Earth, and then you're not going to achieve the outcomes. And she said, look at the outcomes in the middle. And in the middle, there's a circle with 4 outcomes: purpose, meaning, belonging, and hope. And she said, what the continuum is saying is, if you don't begin with culture, which comes from Mother Earth, then you're not going to achieve the outcomes of wellness, which are meaning, purpose, belonging, and hope. And so this puzzle uses the continuum, the teaching of continuum, to find purpose, to find meaning, to find belonging and hope. Whether it's however you can connect to it, right? To the puzzle, to the presentation, then that is how we're going to achieve wellness. And that's what this is about, is wellness. So oftentimes, sometimes I'll go in, you're going to talk to engineers that are from all over the world, and they, you know, the purpose for them, it's harder to get to the purpose of why we're doing a circle. But generally, once we start talking about the scientific parts of it, they find their meaning within that, and the other elements happen. Well, anyway, now I'm going to put it out there. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you, Dave. I think Vienna has a question here.
Hi, Dave. Thanks for sharing that puzzle with us. You said you were doing this with a lot of different age groups. Do you change the message that you teach through the medicine wheel depending on the different grades you're working with or different audiences, or is it the same teachings?
Definitely different. So if I go in with a group of kids, so 2 years ago, I was working at a school doing a sculpture the reason why they asked me to come to the school is because the kids are all beating each other up, getting into fights, you know, beating each other up. And they said, we want to do something, we need something that these kids can do together to try to develop positive relationships. So I said, sure, I'll bring in a piece of wood. So I brought in a 13-foot long piece of wood. And I asked my mom if she would come and help me, you know, with these kids. And so I brought in the piece of wood, I brought in some tools. I told them, you know, about how we're going to carve this piece. And then I asked them if they want to do the puzzle together. And so they said, okay. And for that group, I said, you know, what this is about is doing something respectfully. One person is going to either put one of the pieces in to where there's going to be a circle, or they can take a piece out, right? Now, when someone goes up to put a piece in, there's no hollering, hooting, you know, it's that person's choice, how they view the pieces, where they think it's going to go. And if you don't agree, when it's your turn, you can take it out, you know? And so what that was developing is boundaries, you know, boundaries and respect for others in how they want to participate, how they want to offer their ideas and perspective to the project, which is, let's make this circle, right? That's what this is. It's a circle puzzle. And so they had great fun. And by the end of it, they were laughing. And a couple of the kids that were beating each other up, you know, they weren't doing that anymore. And so at the end of the puzzle, once we did it, I asked them, would you like to do a carving? I have a piece of wood. A piece of wood was behind me. Do you want to do a carving together? They said, yes, we do. And so 8 months later, that was the year COVID hit too, right? So they presented great problems. We didn't stop though. What happened was we ended up moving the log outside, and I met them outside, rain or shine, until we finished the sculpture. And then my mom came in and she crocheted some hemp rope around these black river rocks, and she put the river rocks onto the piece, and I scorched the piece, so the kids got to see fire. They got to see me scorch the piece and share the knowledge of how I learned about scorching, which is too much for this presentation here. But the kids, when we put the rocks onto the sculpture, 13-foot high, that's pretty high, especially when you're working with little kids, right? So you're looking up, and it's an amazing thing. Some of them saw a whale, some of them saw a person. Once the rocks went on, some of the kids said they're ants, you know, whatever they are. Doesn't matter what they see, it's all good. That's the greatest lesson. And so, but when I go in, let's say I'm going in to work with UBC students, right? Again, it's about the message that carries across the board with all groups: doing something together, respecting others, doing your best. It's about math. The natural anatomical features of the wood are going to help you figure out what it is. But what comes with this experience is greater than just doing a puzzle. By the end of it, myself and those 10 kids ended up spending a year long together through COVID, right? Meeting inside and then outside in the freezing cold, carving, you know, sanding. They got to watch a scorch. So that there's so many other things that come from going to do a puzzle. I'm doing, as I was sharing in Rosalind's sharing circle, I'm doing a carving project right now at a place called Britannia Pavilion, which is outside of Britannia Secondary School. First Nations youth that are in need of graduating can come work with me and Eric Dan for 3-4 months, and then they can graduate. If they need a math, then they get a math. If they need a science, they get a science, social studies. Now, The system, teachers within the system, principals oftentimes get stuck, stuck on, okay, well, they need to pass this test in order for them to demonstrate to us that they have an understanding of whatever, right? Math, algebra. Well, in engaging in this puzzle, in engaging in the sculpting project we're doing, the project we're doing there right now is 16 different sculptures that are 10 foot high, 2.5 foot wide. And in 5 months, it's a miracle that we're almost done. So the youth are participating in university level science, high level engineering, high level physics, and math. And they're asked to journal about it. So, the level of literature or English varies, right? But the point is that they're actively doing something that is of a high level, So I'll just give you an example of what these youth are able to tell me at the end. They'll be able to say, trees, when they're standing, if you imagine the cellular structure of trees, imagine a whole bunch of straws put together, okay? A whole bunch of straws put together and they're empty. That's what the cellular structure of trees looks like. The cells, they're called tracheids, okay? So they're all going up and down like this, right? Now, on the outside, you have bark. Inside the bark, you have something called cambium. Cambium is what connects the roots to the leaves, constantly sending nutrients from the roots up to the leaves and from the photosynthesis of the leaves back down to the roots. That's the cambium layer. Inside that, on red cedar, there's an inch of what they call sapwood, living wood. So that's the only living wood in a tree, is the sapwood. Inside of that is the heartwood. This here, this is all heartwood, okay? And so that most people don't know those kinds of facts about trees. Trees grow out and up. And so when you look at a tree and you see it bend like this, it's not actually bending. Trees, because of the straws, the cellular structure, trees twist. They twist longer when they're bent and shorter when they go straight. So the youth are able to learn about these features, but beyond just telling them about the straws and the bending, all that, is all bring in pictures of tracheids, which are wood cells, bordered pits, which are how wood cells are connected. Resin canals is how the wood gets its color and smell. So the extractives in wood come out through resin canals, through pores. The youth are able to identify those by the end. They're able to generate the understanding and explain it to me that humans, we have pores, right? That's how our sweat comes out. Trees have pores, and that's what the extractives come out of. That's how wood, through the extractive, gets its color and its smell. So beyond that, if you'll notice, there's a shine to this puzzle. How does wood get its shine? Well, not through a product, but through sanding. So we go through 14 different grades of sandpaper when we did this. And starting on a rough one and going up to 2500 grit, which is what they use for metal. And so what's happening when you sand is, imagine the pore of a wood is like that, okay? Imagine it's that big when you start. You go through the first stage and it goes a little smaller. Next stage, a little smaller, 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 until finally you close it and it reflects light. Okay, so that's a little bit about how you incorporate the Western knowledge that you need to in doing something that's fun, like a puzzle, but the puzzle now is pretty cool because it's an intro into doing a real carving project, that starts as a raw piece of wood. But by the end of it, every piece that you do is a puzzle. You never know how it's going to come apart. There's no drawn design for myself anyway, how I do it. But so that's a little bit about what I do. And I wish I could show you the carving project at Britannia. Because we have 16 sculptures right now, 10 foot. Now, these 16 sculptures are all separate figures. Some look like humans, some look like Sasquatch, some looks like a whale. I've heard dolphin, snake, 16 different 10-foot figures. And what we're doing with the figures is we're making boxes. And so, you know, when we started, it's just big slabs of wood, raw slabs. And everyone's looking at these. And when they see the raw, milled, unworked slabs, and I say boxes, they say, I get it. Yep, boxes, got it. And then, of course, I don't do things in straight lines, right? My type of carving is, when people say it, they'll go abstract. I don't think it's abstract, but they say abstract. Anyway, so 2 weeks in, we have Sasquatches, snakes, dolphins, you name it, all sorts of cool figures. And the question starts to come up. How are you gonna put these boxes together? They don't have any sizes that are gonna meet. And so then that's when I told them about how we're gonna do it, which is the engineering aspect. My friend Paul, who is a metal fabricator, comes in and explains how these are going to be made. So the boxes, you can see through the boxes, right? You'll be able to easily access the treasure that's in the boxes. Beyond that, in 4 of the biggest ones, where the heart would be or the chest, there's a hole. And so everyone asks, what's the hole for? And I'll stand the piece up, and I'll actually have to lift up and bend it down a bit, and I'll go, hello, somebody please help me, I'm stuck in a box. And I'll say, we put the holes in the box because we don't want to get stuck in a box, right? And, you know, if anyone gets stuck in there where there's a hole there, they can yell and help, and we can help them get out. Getting stuck in the box is real easy inside the school, you know. And anyway, that's a little bit about that project. And really, I'd like to put it out there again. Is there any other questions? Because through questions, I'll be able to share more. You know, right now I'm just talking on doing the best I can to talk. But if there's any questions that you have, it'll evoke more memories. Oh, I want to show you something. Yes. So this puzzle or this other one, I want to show you again about participation. The big thing's participation. So this was signed by hundreds of kids because this wasn't the only one. Of this, again, it was a puzzle project that didn't end up with 14 pieces like this. Started off rectangle slab of wood, but it turned into 4 circles like this, which I called just the 4 circles, right? And then we sanded them, finished them. Took us a year actually, because I only came once a week. But what else was connected to this same piece of wood, because this piece of wood was 10 foot long in the beginning. The 5 foot on this side turned into 4 walking sticks. And the 10 foot on this side, or the 5 foot on this side, turned into 4 puzzles that were signed. They were signed on anti-bullying day. And so kids put hearts, they put kind messages. And what it was an agreement between all of us that we were going to see each other in a good way, we were going to treat each other a good way, and acknowledge that we all have 4 parts of being: emotional, physical, spiritual, and intellectual. And it's important that we respect all those 4 parts of being. And so at the time, there was a guy, Dean Blythe Frank, who was the dean of UBC Education. He signed this piece. So did Santa Ono and his wife Wendy Ip, and several others, on top of the kids from grade schools, high schools, and university. Anyway, that was one thing. And if there's anything else that you'd like to know about, please let me know.
Thank you, Dave, for sharing all that knowledge with us. And it's very important to acknowledge that there's many different areas of well-being that we should always touch upon. I think Stephanie has a question here. If you would like to unmute yourself, Stephanie.
Hi, I was just wondering if there's a special practice for gathering or choosing the wood, if you have to do any traditional practices with that.
Okay, so that's a good question. You know, how I started out is cool. I'm just going to tell you how I started. How I started carving was I used to own a landscaping business, and I also used to be a professional boxer and an amateur boxer. When I was still amateur, I was going to the Nationals, which in that year was in Vancouver at the River Rock Casino. And, but I didn't have any time to take time off work. We were just busy. So anyway, this job comes along, and I got to cut down a tree. Really difficult job. Like, there was a tree about this big, and there's a roof right here, and there's a roof right here. So I got to follow this tree. There's like no room for error. Anyway, make the fall, keep the log, and I tell myself, I thank the tree, tell it you're going to be my first carving. And so I hold on to the tree for a few years, and I turned that into my first sculpture 9 years ago, when I moved to where I'm living now. When I first go back to Langara College to go back to school. And so that's how I got my first log. But then I start carving, and I connect with this old guy in his 80s named Captain Dave Horn, who's a pioneer and comes from Pioneers, and old tugboat driver, call him Captain Dave. And he's got a mill and wood, you know. So I go see Captain Dave, and that's where this came from. This one day I'm in there buying 5 logs, 10-foot long, and he says, you know, you want this old growth piece of yellow cedar? I said, yes, I do. Right? Of course, it was huge. You know, this is this size now, but when I got it, it came from huge old growth yellow. All yellow cedar is old growth because it grows high up. But so as far as I was concerned in the beginning, buy wood on the market, right? Anyone can buy wood on the free market. That's what I did. And then, but I did get a lot of questions about where do you get your wood, how do you get your wood, and you know, I've always done my best to be as vague as possible until a few years ago. Now I don't. It doesn't bother me, you know. 4 or 5 years ago, I was working at the UBC farm as the first carver in residence at the Indigenous carving space there. So Captain Dave Horn, when I first bought wood off him, sold me 3 logs or 4 logs. One was a red cedar 12-foot tall, one was a yellow cedar 10-foot tall. I dropped the 10-foot tall log off at my house. I dropped the 13-foot log off at John Oliver Secondary to carve with kids from Take a Hike. That was a 2-year project because 6 months into that project, for no money, might I add, you didn't get $1, but good work with the youth. 6 months into that project, teachers go on strike. We want more money. And so I had to wait until the following year. And we finished that project. And I'll share a bit more about that. But the other one, the 10-foot at home, was yellow cedar. That sculpture came to be named, I named it Thunderchild, which I donated to the UBC Indigenous Garden, which was raised in a traditional pole raising ceremony by Shane Point. And that was a great honor. When he raised that, though, he also blessed the rock. I remember him saying the rock was called Quisunatan. He said in Coast Salish that means anchor. He said that was a Musqueam Quisunatan, Musqueam anchor. On that same day, Musqueam elder Larry Grant named the UBC Indigenous Garden Watsitium, which means the place where we grow. And I asked Uncle Larry Grant about that day. And he said, you know, that name, Watsitium, extends beyond the boundaries. He said, Thunderchild, which Shane raised, and Quisunatan, which he anchored and blessed. He said, those are boundaries. Those are the name. He said, those are the remarking of boundaries, and they extend beyond the garden and beyond the farm. They're the remarking of boundaries for them, the Coast Salish people, that haven't been respected in past times. And so, when Thunderchild was raised, or in the language, what I heard Keaton or Shane Point say was Su Khayal stack with, Su Khayal thunder, stack with other people's children. That's what Shane Point said when he raised it. So that's what I remember from being there as a witness. Now, the other piece came to, that I finished at John Oliver. That's actually where I met Shane Point. So after I was done, I carved that sculpture with the kids for 1.5 years in a building that was abandoned and going to be torn down. I don't think they tore it down yet, but it was an abandoned building. They said you can carve in there with the kids, so I did. I was in my first year at NITEC, and so good experience, right? And it was a good experience, but you know, there was no reciprocity between myself and the school as far as you know, for the law, anything. But it was really good working with those kids, and it was a positive, great experience. And so I just leave the school and I'm done, you know, because the project's over. And so 1 year later, I get a call before Thunderchild goes up. I get a call like 6 months before. I get a call from the principal at John Oliver. We want you to come in. You know, Shane Point, the first Vancouver School Board's first knowledge keeper in residence, wants to talk to you. And he said that he would like to raise many beings, the sculpture was called, in a ceremony as part of a coming of age ceremony for the graduating class of that year. And he said, you know, what do you think? And I said, I'd be honored, and any thing I can do to help, I would love to. And so there's a lot more to that story. But you're asked where I get my wood. That's where I got my wood in the beginning. But when I met Shane at John Oliver, and I said yes, he had a niece, Shauna Tate, with him, and he said, hand me my wallet, niece. And so he took out a $100 bill out of his wallet, and he said, you see this? I said, yes. He said, this is fish. He said, in the old days, when you wanted, he said, here, when you wanted to anchor someone's canoe, to build you a canoe or provide you a service, you would provide that person with fish to feed themselves and their family. When they were done the service, if there needed to be more fish, there was more fish. And he said, I would like to anchor you with this fish to make me a walking stick this big. And so I did that. I didn't have his number or anything, right? Just said, okay, took the anchor and I needed that fish and it fed me during the exams that year. And so I make him a lightning bolt because he told me his name was Teek-Tan, which means sound of thunder. And so I made him a lightning bolt, but it was 10 foot tall because on top of the bolt was a serpent. And so on the day he was raising any beings, I brought this 10-foot walking stick and he said, well, I wanted this big. And I said, I know, but you know, this is how it went. And so we discussed what would happen, and I cut off the bolt and I put brass on the top of the bottom to represent the wealth of what I heard him say, community, culture, and ceremony were so necessary, and that's what the wealth of that represented. And so I gifted that to him. And about 6 months later, Thunderchild went up, and the top half that was a serpent was gifted to Eduardo Hovel. And then a year later, I bought another log from Captain Dave Horn, and I was carving that. And there's too much to share on that. I'm just going to fast forward to a bit. I'm coming onto the farm one day and I see a sign that says there's going to be, you know, all these trees chopped down and chipped up. So I called UBC Properties. They said, you can have the trees, but you got to talk to Polygon. So I talked to Polygon, can I have the trees? They said, sure. So I inherited 40 second growth red cedar trees. And so that's where I got the wood for, you know, about 5 years. And so to answer your question, I get the wood from the free market. When I saw wood available, I took it. I have heard that, you know, but I know that's a different thing than going out into the forest and picking your wood, picking your tree. That's a different thing that I haven't done. Currently, right now, I'm working on a 100-foot old growth red cedar sculpture that's 5 20-foot logs. I didn't go out into the forest to buy them. I bought them on what would be considered a stock market. Not stock market like on computer. I went to a dry sort yard and I picked 5 merchant logs and I was the only one that bought wood that day that stayed in Canada. So to answer your question, I get wood, buy wood, but actually I don't really get wood. Besides those 40 trees, you know, I pay for all my wood because I want there to be no arguing as to the ownership. Any other questions? Oh, first, Stephanie, did that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I think we're just heading towards the end of the presentation as this next section begins. So
okay, I want to ask you all.
yeah,
Did you enjoy the presentation? This
Yes.
was different than we usually do.
yeah, for sure. And I would ask if you would be wanting to share your contact again in the chat. So in case any of the attendees want to follow up with you, then they can connect with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing, Dave. That was a really cool learning how you share that knowledge through your puzzle and your artwork.
Thank you. That was fun. And I'll tell you what, I'd love to do so much more though. If I didn't have to be, you know, in a room, or I'd bring you to this. We got 16 sculptures happening right now. You wouldn't believe it. I wish that's what we were doing today. But you know, within the confines of virtual conferencing, I think we did pretty good.
Hopefully you can come back next year and we get to do this in person.
Yes, yeah, I heard it's in Cowichan next year. Looking forward to that.
Thank you, Dave. So on the behalf of Dave and the Indigenous Physical Activity Cultural Circle, I'd like to thank everyone for attending this valuable presentation. So please leave this breakout room now and join the main conference room. And thank you everyone again for joining us.
Yes, we can.
Leave